The crystal chandeliers of the Ashford Grand Ballroom cast dancing shadows across the marble floors, each flicker of light reflecting off champagne glasses and diamond necklaces worth more than most people's homes. The air hummed with artificial laughter, business deals disguised as pleasantries, and the subtle choreography of the elite protecting their empires. Vivian Walters stood near the champagne fountain, her emerald dress hugging her curves in a way that turned heads but didn't invite conversation. She preferred it that way. At 27, she'd learned that in rooms like these, packed with politicians, oil tycoons, and men whose handshake sealed fates, beauty was both armor and weapon. Her dark hair fell in calculated waves over one shoulder, and her expression remained pleasantly neutral even as her mind catalogued every face, every whispered conversation, every shift in the room's power dynamics. She was here for one reason, to secure the Westmore account for her firm. 3 years of 80-hour weeks, of swallowing pride and proving herself in a world that still saw her as a pretty face rather than the shark she'd become. Tonight was supposed to be her victory lap. Then he walked past. She didn't know his name. Didn't know the weight that name carried in the shadows of the city, in back rooms where blood was currency and loyalty was bought with fear. She only saw what everyone else saw, a man in an immaculate midnight blue suit, dark hair swept back with careless precision, a jawline that could cut glass, and eyes the color of a winter storm, cold, assessing, dangerous in a way that made smart people step back. Dante Corleone moved through the crowd like a predator through tall grass, and the crowd parted without conscious thought, some primal instinct warning them to give him space. At 34, he'd built an empire that existed in whispers and carefully maintained fear. The Corleone family didn't make headlines. They owned the people who did. He wasn't interested in the party. These gatherings were theater, and he'd long ago tired of the performance. He came because his presence sent a message: we're watching. We're always watching. Vivian didn't see him approaching. She was balanced precariously on her heels, reaching for a champagne flute on the fountain's second tier, her fingers just brushing the stem when someone crashed into her from behind. The glass tipped. Champagne cascaded down in a golden arc, and Vivian stumbled backward, directly into Dante's path. He moved instinctively, his hand shooting out to steady her, but the momentum was too much. His other hand, holding his own drink, tilted, and the contents splashed across the front of her dress. Vivian gasped, feeling the cold liquid seep through the expensive fabric. She spun around, mortification flooding her cheeks with heat, ready to apologize to whoever she'd collided with. But Dante was already stepping back, his face impassive, not a word of apology on his lips. He simply reached for a napkin from a passing server's tray and began wiping his hands, as if she were the one who had inconvenienced him. Something hot and sharp flared in Vivian's chest. She'd spent 3 years swallowing disrespect from entitled men who thought their money bought them permission to treat people as furniture. She'd smiled through it, played the game, bit her tongue until it bled. Not tonight. Excuse me. Her voice cut through the ambient noise, sharper than she'd intended. A few heads turned. You spilled your drink on me. Dante's eyes lifted slowly, and for a brief moment, something flickered in those grey depths, surprise, perhaps, that she'd spoken at all. Most people who crossed his path either apologized profusely or said nothing, preferring to disappear into the crowd. You walked into me, he said simply, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the space between them. No apology. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just fact, delivered with the certainty of someone unaccustomed to being questioned. Vivian felt the stares now. The circle of space around them was widening. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a warning bell rang, the way people were looking at this man, the careful distance they maintained, but her anger drowned it out. I was pushed, she said, her voice steady despite the rage simmering beneath. And instead of apologizing like someone with basic manners, you're standing here acting as if. She paused, her eyes scanning him with deliberate disdain. As if you lack home training entirely. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. The room didn't go silent, that would have been too obvious, but the quality of sound changed. Conversations continued, but every ear was straining to hear what would happen next. Because everyone in that room knew exactly who Dante Corleone was. Everyone except the woman standing before him with fire in her eyes and champagne soaking through her dress. Dante went utterly still. In 20 years of ruling the city's underworld, no one had spoken to him this way. Presidents had shaken his hand with forced smiles. Judges had ruled in his favor while their families slept safely. Men twice his size had knelt before him and begged for mercy. And this woman, this stranger in a ruined dress, had just insulted him to his face. He studied her with new interest. Her cheeks were flushed, her breathing slightly elevated, but her gaze never wavered. She wasn't backing down. She didn't even know she should. Home training, he repeated softly, and several people nearby actually flinched at his tone. It was quiet, controlled, but underneath ran a current of something dark and absolute. That's an interesting phrase. It means manners, Vivian snapped, beyond caution now. The ability to say I'm sorry when you've wronged someone. The basic human decency too. I know what it means. His words sliced through hers like a blade. He took a single step closer, and Vivian's body finally registered what her mind had been too angry to notice: danger. Real, immediate, suffocating danger. What I find interesting is that you feel entitled to lecture me on manners while making a scene at someone else's event. I'm making a scene. Vivian laughed, the sound bitter. You ruined my dress and acted like I should thank you for the privilege. If that's what passes for sophistication in your world, I'd hate to see what. Vivian. A hand gripped her elbow, firm, urgent. James Whitmore, her firm's senior partner, had materialized beside her, his face pale beneath his tan. I'm so sorry, Mr. Corleone. Ms. Walters is new to these events. She didn't mean any disrespect. Mr. Corleone. The name detonated in Vivian's mind. She'd heard it whispered in her firm's hallways, seen it in the news buried beneath careful language about alleged activities and suspected connections. The Corleone family. The untouchable empire that lived in the spaces between legal and lethal. Oh God. Her anger drained away like water through a sieve, replaced by ice-cold realization. She'd just insulted a mafia boss. In public. In front of witnesses who would undoubtedly repeat every word. Dante watched the recognition dawn on her face with dark satisfaction. There it was, the fear he was accustomed to seeing. The understanding that she'd made a mistake that couldn't be unmade. New to these events, he repeated, his eyes never leaving Vivian's face. Is that so? She didn't know, James began, but Dante raised a hand, silencing him instantly. I wasn't speaking to you, James. The use of his first name was deliberate, a reminder of hierarchy. James was wealthy, powerful in his sphere. It meant nothing here. I want to hear from Ms. Walters. Do you make a habit of insulting people you don't know, or am I special? Vivian's throat had gone dry. She should apologize. Every survival instinct screamed at her to back down, to grovel, to beg forgiveness from this man who could destroy her with a phone call. But something else stirred beneath the fear. Pride, stubbornness, the same trait that had pushed her to the top of her class, that had made her fight for every inch of respect in a world designed to keep her down. She'd meant what she said. He had been rude. The fact that he was dangerous didn't change that. I make a habit, she said quietly, her voice steady despite her racing heart, of expecting basic respect. Money and power don't excuse bad manners. They never have. Someone nearby inhaled sharply. James's grip on her elbow tightened to the point of pain. Dante's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, a spark of something she couldn't identify. Anger? Interest? Both? You're right, he said finally, and the surprise of those words rippled through the watching crowd. Money and power don't excuse bad manners. He paused, his gaze dropping to the champagne stains spreading across her dress, then back to her face. But ignorance doesn't excuse stupidity either. He turned without another word, cutting through the crowd like a ship through water, leaving Vivian standing there with her ruined dress and the sudden, crushing weight of what she'd done. James released her elbow and stepped back, his face a mask of fury. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Do you have even the slightest? I know, Vivian whispered, watching Dante's retreating figure disappear toward the exit. I know exactly what I've done. But she didn't. Not really. She didn't know that Dante Corleone had already decided her fate in the 30 seconds it took him to reach his car. Didn't know that his driver saw the expression on his boss's face and wisely remained silent. Didn't know that as Dante settled into the leather seat and pulled out his phone, he was already making calls to people who specialized in dismantling lives. She didn't know that she'd just declared war on the most dangerous man in the city. And she had absolutely no idea that in his quest to destroy her completely, Dante Corleone would discover something that would change everything, a truth buried so deep that not even Vivian herself knew it existed. A truth that would transform his hatred into something far more dangerous. Obsession. The morning after the party, Vivian woke to find her world already crumbling. Her phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand, 12 missed calls from James, 7 from her assistant, and 3 from numbers she didn't recognize. Her email inbox had exploded overnight with meeting cancellations, and when she finally called James back, his words were clipped and cold. The Westmore account is gone. They pulled out an hour ago. No explanation. A pause, heavy with accusation. Clean out your desk by Friday, Vivian. The partners voted this morning. 3 years of work. Gone in 12 hours. She sat on the edge of her bed, still in yesterday's ruined dress, and felt the walls of her carefully constructed life begin to collapse. But beneath the shock, beneath the fear, something else burned, the same stubborn fire that had gotten her into this mess. She'd worked too hard to let one powerful man erase her. What Vivian didn't know was that across the city, in a penthouse office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, Dante Corleone was learning everything about her. Vivian Rose Walters, his right-hand man, Gabriel Malone, read from a tablet. 27. Graduated top of her class at Columbia. No family, parents died in a car accident when she was 19. Scholarship student. Worked 3 jobs to pay for law school. No criminal record, no debts, no connections to anyone significant. Dante stood at the window, hands in his pockets, his reflection ghostly in the glass. She's alone. Completely. Makes her vulnerable. Gabriel set down the tablet. I've already started the process. Her firm fired her this morning. I'll have her blacklisted from every major company by end of day. Within a week, she'll be desperate enough to. No. Dante turned, his expression unreadable. I want to watch her fight. Gabriel frowned. Boss, if you want her to suffer, cutting off her resources is the fastest. I don't want fast. Something dark flickered across Dante's face, a memory of her standing in that ballroom, chin raised, eyes blazing with righteous anger. No fear. No hesitation. Just pure, fearless defiance. I want to see what she's made of. Break her slowly. Make her understand exactly who she challenged. What Dante didn't say, what he barely acknowledged to himself, was that something about Vivian Walters had burrowed under his skin. In a world of people who cowered and scraped, who said yes before he'd even asked the question, she'd looked him in the eye and called him out. It was infuriating. It was interesting. There's something else, Gabriel said carefully. Her parents' accident. I pulled the police reports. There were inconsistencies. Dante's gaze sharpened. What kind of inconsistencies? The kind that suggest it wasn't an accident at all. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Dante nodded slowly. Dig deeper. I want to know everything. He told himself it was tactical, knowing your enemy meant knowing their weaknesses. But deep down, in a place he'd locked away years ago when he'd first taken over his family's empire, something whispered that this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about understanding the woman who'd seen the monster everyone feared and refused to look away. Meanwhile, Vivian stood in her apartment, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were red from crying, but her jaw was set with determination. She'd lost her job. Fine. She'd built herself up from nothing once before. She'd do it again. What she didn't know was that Dante Corleone was about to make that impossible, and in doing so, would uncover secrets that would shatter everything both of them believed about her past. The game had begun. And neither of them knew the rules. 2 weeks later, Vivian was running out of options. Every interview ended the same way, polite smiles that turned to stone when they saw her name on the resume. Doors that had been wide open now slammed shut before she could even speak. She wasn't just blacklisted, she was invisible. Her savings were dwindling. Rent was due in 3 days. That's when she received the letter. It arrived in a cream envelope with no return address, the paper thick and expensive. Inside, a single card with embossed lettering. Catalina Restaurant. 8 p.m. tonight. Come alone. Someone wants to help you. Every instinct told her it was a trap. But desperation makes people reckless, and Vivian was desperate. She arrived at Catalina 15 minutes early, wearing the only professional dress she had left that wasn't stained with champagne. The restaurant was elegant, dimly lit, with private booths that promised discretion. The hostess led her to a corner table where a figure sat shrouded in shadow. Her heart stopped when he leaned forward into the candlelight. Dante Corleone. Sit, he said softly. Not a request. Vivian's legs locked. You did this to me. I did. No denial, no shame. Just simple acknowledgement. Sit down, Vivian. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. But even as she spoke, her body betrayed her, swaying slightly from skipping lunch, from the stress of 2 weeks drowning. His eyes caught the movement, and something flickered across his face. Concern? No. Men like him didn't feel concern. Sit, or I'll make the next 2 weeks look like a vacation, he said calmly, gesturing to the chair across from him. Your choice. She Saturday. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. A server appeared instantly with wine, poured 2 glasses, and vanished like smoke. Dante took a sip, studying her over the rim with those winter-grey eyes that seemed to see straight through her carefully maintained composure. You've been looking for work, he said. How's that going? You know exactly how it's going. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled in her lap. You made sure of it. I did. He set down his glass. You disrespected me in front of people whose respect I've spent 20 years earning. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? I think you're a bully hiding behind power. The words escaped before she could stop them. Even now, even knowing what he could do, she couldn't seem to bow. To her shock, Dante smiled, a real smile that transformed his face from dangerous to devastating. There she is. I was wondering if I'd broken that fire yet. What do you want? Vivian demanded. You've destroyed my career. Congratulations. If you brought me here just to gloat. I brought you here to make an offer. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, his gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Work for me. Vivian blinked. What? I need someone with your particular fearlessness. Someone who doesn't bend easily. Someone smart enough to see through the games people play. His fingers drummed once on the table, a rare sign of something beneath that controlled exterior. I'm offering you a position in one of my legitimate businesses. Good salary. Better than what you were making. Legitimate, she repeated flatly. You don't do legitimate. I do many things, Vivian. Some of them even legal. That dangerous smile again. You'd be consulting for my real estate acquisitions. Nothing that would compromise your precious morals. She should say no. Should run from this restaurant and never look back. But her landlord's last warning echoed in her mind, and the electricity bill sitting unpaid on her counter, and the empty refrigerator at home. Why? She asked. Why would you help me after what you did? Dante was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a strange note she couldn't decipher. Because I'm curious. You're not afraid of me the way you should be. I want to understand why. Is this some kind of sick game? Everything's a game, Vivian. The question is whether you're smart enough to play. He slid a folder across the table. Contracts inside. Standard terms, nothing nefarious. You can have a lawyer review it if you'd like, though good luck finding one willing to take your call right now. The cruelty of that statement, the reminder that he'd isolated her completely, should have made her hate him more. Instead, something cold settled in her stomach. This was a cage disguised as salvation. But it was still salvation. She opened the folder with shaking hands. The salary made her dizzy, triple what she'd been making. Health insurance. Benefits. All for consulting work that looked legitimate on paper. What's the catch? She whispered. The catch is that you'll be working for me. And I have very high standards. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. After that, the offer expires, and I'll ensure you never work in this city again. He started to walk away, then paused, turning back with an expression she couldn't read. For what it's worth, Vivian, you were right that night. I should have apologized for the dress. I was rude. His eyes held hers for a heartbeat too long. But you should have known better than to call out a monster in his own territory. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with a contract that felt like a deal with the devil and the creeping certainty that accepting it would change everything. What Vivian didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that while Dante had been orchestrating her destruction, Gabriel had been digging into her past. And what he'd found had changed everything. The car accident that killed her parents hadn't been an accident. It had been a hit. Ordered by someone in the Corleone organization 20 years ago. And Dante's father had signed off on it. The man currently offering Vivian salvation was the son of the man who'd made her an orphan. Vivian signed the contract. She told herself it was survival, not surrender. That she'd work for Dante Corleone just long enough to get back on her feet, then disappear before his world could swallow her whole. She was lying to herself, and somewhere deep down, she knew it. Her first day at Corleone Enterprises was nothing like she'd expected. The office occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown tower, all glass and steel and beautiful people moving with purpose. Her role was exactly as advertised, reviewing property acquisitions, analyzing market trends, advising on investments. It was legitimate. Disturbingly so. He keeps the dirty work separate, her new colleague Adrian Ripley whispered during lunch her first week. He was young, ambitious, with nervous eyes that darted toward the executive floor whenever he spoke. Everything illegal happens somewhere else. This company? Clean as snow. That's how he's untouchable. Vivian wanted to ask more, but Dante appeared in the doorway of the break room, and Adrian went silent so fast he nearly choked on his coffee. Ms. Walters. My office. Now. Her heart hammered as she followed him down the corridor to the executive suite. His office was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, and a view of the city that made you feel like a god surveying his kingdom. Dante stood at those windows, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense beneath his tailored jacket. The Riverside Project, he said without turning. What's your assessment? She'd stayed up until 3 a.m. reviewing that file. It's a trap. The property looks profitable on paper, but the previous 3 owners all defaulted within 18 months. There's something wrong with the foundation, literal and metaphorical. Someone's trying to unload a disaster onto you. He turned slowly, and for the first time since she'd met him, Dante Corleone looked impressed. Everyone else told me to buy it. Everyone else is either incompetent or working for whoever's selling. She held his gaze, refusing to be intimidated in this space that smelled like expensive cologne and danger. You hired me to tell you the truth. That's the truth. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in that perfect control. You're not afraid of me at all, are you? I'm terrified of you, Vivian admitted quietly. But I'm more afraid of being weak. Of bowing to people just because they have power. She paused. My parents taught me that before they died. The mention of her parents made Dante go utterly still. Guilt flickered across his face so quickly she almost missed it. There and gone like lightning. Your parents, he repeated slowly. The car accident. You were 19. Yes. The memory was a scar that never fully healed. Drunk driver. At least, that's what the police said. They never caught him. Dante turned back to the window, his jaw tight. He knew. Gabriel had told him everything 3 days ago, how his father had ordered the hit on Thomas and Catherine Walters, 2 investigative journalists who'd gotten too close to exposing the Corleone family's operations. How a young Vivian had come home from college to identify her parents' bodies. How the drunk driver story was a lie his family had paid good money to maintain. Standing here now, watching this brilliant woman who'd rebuilt herself from that tragedy, a tragedy he'd inherited, Dante felt something he hadn't experienced in 15 years. Shame. I'm sorry, he said quietly. About your parents. Vivian blinked, startled by the genuine emotion in his voice. Thank you. That's unexpected. He should tell her. Right now. Should confess everything and accept whatever came next, her rage, her hatred, her vengeance. But the words stuck in his throat because telling her meant losing her, and Dante was beginning to realize he didn't want to lose her. Over the next 3 weeks, something strange happened. Vivian proved invaluable to his business, spotting scams, negotiating deals, turning failing investments into gold mines. But more than that, she challenged him. argued with him, made him laugh with her sharp wit and sharper observations about the pompous men who came through his office. He found himself inventing reasons to call her to his office. Found himself watching the clock until she arrived each morning. Found himself caring what she thought about things that had nothing to do with business. "You're playing with fire," Gabriel warned him one evening after Vivian had left. "She's not some toy, boss. And when she finds out what you're hiding, she won't." Dante's voice was hard, but his hands were shaking as he poured whiskey. "Not if we're careful." "And if she does?" Dante didn't answer because he didn't have one. The truth would destroy whatever was building between them, this strange, impossible thing that felt like trust, like friendship, like something far more dangerous than either. Meanwhile, Vivian was fighting her own battles. She hated that she looked forward to seeing Dante each day. Hated that his rare smiles made her pulse quicken. Hated that beneath the monster everyone feared, she'd glimpsed something human, something wounded and lonely and carefully hidden. She told herself it was Stockholm Syndrome. Told herself she was just grateful for the job, the stability, the way he'd pulled her from drowning. But late at night, alone in her apartment, she admitted the terrifying truth: she was beginning to care about Dante Corleone. And that was more dangerous than anything he could do to her. The fourth week, everything shifted. Vivian was working late, alone in the office, when she found a file on Dante's desk marked with her parents' names. Her blood went cold. With shaking hands, she opened it, and her entire world shattered. Police reports marked sealed. Photographs of the accident scene with notes in the margins. Stage completed successfully. Payment records to a man named Vincent Shaw, the supposed drunk driver who'd never been caught. And at the bottom, a signature she didn't recognize but a name she'd never forget: Antonio Corleone. Authorized. Dante's father. The room spun. Her parents hadn't died in an accident. They'd been murdered. Murdered by the Corleone family. And Dante had known. He'd known and said nothing. Had hired her, had played with her like a cat with a mouse, all while hiding the fact that his family had destroyed hers. Rage and betrayal crashed through her in waves so powerful she couldn't breathe. Her hands crumpled the papers, tears streaming down her face as the truth assembled itself into a nightmare. She was working for her parents' killers. And she'd been starting to fall for one of them. Vivian was still standing in Dante's office, the damning file clutched in her trembling hands, when she heard footsteps in the corridor. He was coming back. Panic seized her. She shoved the papers back into the folder, her movements jerky and desperate, and was halfway to the door when Dante walked in. Their eyes met, and time stopped. He saw the file on his desk, slightly askew, papers sticking out at wrong angles. Saw her flushed face, the tears still wet on her cheeks, the way her entire body vibrated with barely contained emotion. He knew instantly what she'd found. "Vivian," he started, his voice careful, placating. "Don't." The word came out broken, raw. "Don't you dare speak to me." She tried to push past him, but Dante caught her wrist, gently, but firm enough to stop her. The touch sent electricity through both of them, but now it felt like a live wire, dangerous and burning. "Let me explain," he said quietly, his gray eyes searching hers with something that looked disturbingly like desperation. "Explain." Vivian laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. "Explain how your family murdered my parents? How you've known this entire time and said nothing? How you hired me, played these sick games with me while," her voice broke, "while I was starting to trust you." That last admission hung between them like a confession, and Dante's grip on her wrist tightened imperceptibly. "I didn't know," he said, and the truth in his voice made her hesitate. "Not when I met you at that party. Not when I destroyed your career. I found out 3 weeks ago, and I've been trying to figure out how to tell you." 3 weeks. Vivian wrenched her arm free, backing away from him like he was diseased. "You've known for 3 weeks and watched me work for you?" Watched me, she couldn't finish. Couldn't admit how many times she'd caught herself staring at him, wondering what it would feel like if he touched her without anger between them. "I was trying to protect you." Dante's control cracked, his voice rising. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to care about the daughter of people my father had killed?" The admission shocked them both into silence. "Care about." The words echoed in the space between them, impossible and true. Vivian's hands curled into fists. Your father ordered their deaths. They were journalists investigating your family, and he had them murdered because they were getting too close to the truth. Tears streamed freely now, and she didn't bother wiping them away. I was 19 years old. I came home from college and identified their bodies. Do you understand what that did to me? Yes. Dante's voice was hoarse. I do. Because I was 17 when my father forced me to watch my first execution. When he taught me that mercy was weakness and love was a liability. He took a step toward her, his eyes blazing with something raw and unguarded. We're both victims of Antonio Corleone, Vivian. He destroyed your family and he destroyed whatever soul I had left. That doesn't make us the same, she whispered, but her voice wavered. No, Dante agreed. It makes us something worse. It makes us impossible. He moved closer, and Vivian knew she should run, should scream, should do anything but stand there as he reached up and gently, so gently, brushed a tear from her cheek. I've done terrible things, he said softly, his thumb tracing her jawline. Things that should make you hate me. Things I can never take back. But I didn't kill your parents, Vivian. And when I found out the truth, I wanted to tell you. I tried to tell you a dozen times, but... But what? Her voice was barely audible. But I was terrified you'd look at me exactly the way you're looking at me now. Like I'm the monster everyone says I am. Vivian should agree. Should tell him that's exactly what he was and walk out of his life forever. But standing this close to him, seeing the naked vulnerability in his eyes, vulnerability she suspected no one else had ever witnessed, she couldn't make the words come. Why didn't your father just kill me too? She asked suddenly. I was a loose end. A witness who might remember something. Why let me live? Dante's jaw tightened. I don't know. But I'm going to find out. He moved to his desk and made a phone call, his voice low and commanding. Vivian listened in numb shock as he ordered Gabriel to bring every file related to her parents' case, including the parts that had been sealed even from him. When he hung up, he turned back to her. My father's been dead for 5 years. I took over the family business and spent the first 2 years dismantling everything he built that I could without starting a war. But there are things even I don't have access to. Things he kept hidden. He paused. Your parents' full case file is one of them. You're lying. But she wasn't sure anymore. I'm a lot of things, Vivian. But I've never lied to you. Not once. He held her gaze. Stay. Let me help you find the truth about why they died and why you lived. If you still want to destroy me when we're done, I won't stop you. It was insane. Trusting him after what she'd learned was beyond foolish, it was suicidal. But Vivian had spent 8 years wondering why that drunk driver was never caught, why the investigation went cold so quickly, why she'd always felt like there was something more to her parents' deaths. And now she had a chance at answers. Okay, she whispered. But this doesn't change what you did. What your family did. I know. Dante's expression was bleak. But maybe together we can finally put some ghosts to rest. Gabriel arrived 20 minutes later with a box of files that had been locked in a vault at Dante's estate, his father's personal records. They spent the next 3 hours combing through documents, and what they found made Vivian's blood run cold. Her parents hadn't just been investigating the Corleone family's criminal activities. They'd discovered that Vivian wasn't really their daughter at all. She'd been taken from another family as an infant, a family that Antonio Corleone had wanted leverage against. Thomas and Catherine Walters had been in the process of exposing not just organized crime, but a child trafficking ring that extended into the highest levels of government. And when they'd threatened to go public with everything, including the truth about Vivian's real identity, Antonio had them killed. But he'd left Vivian alive because she was insurance. Proof that could still be used if needed. Vivian stared at the birth certificate in her hands, her real birth certificate, with names she didn't recognize and a birth date that was different from the one she'd celebrated her entire life. Who am I? She whispered. Dante looked at the document over her shoulder, and his face went white. Oh God, he breathed. Vivian, your real name is Vivian Elena Mocchetti. The name meant nothing to her. So. The Mocchetti family, Dante's voice was strained. They are one of the oldest crime families in Europe. They've been at war with the Corleones for 50 years. He met her eyes, and she saw genuine fear there for the first time. If they find out you're alive, They'll either kill you as revenge for what my father did, or use you as a weapon against me. The room spun. Vivian wasn't who she thought she was. Her entire life had been a lie. And now she was standing in the office of a man whose family had stolen her from her real parents, raised her as someone else, and murdered the only parent she'd ever known. And the worst part, the absolutely worst part, was that even knowing all of this, even drowning in betrayal and identity crisis and grief, she couldn't stop the way her heart raced when Dante looked at her. Couldn't stop wanting him to hold her while her world fell apart. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice small and lost. Dante took her hand, the first time he'd done so without anger or manipulation between them. His touch was warm, solid, real in a world that suddenly felt like quicksand. "We survive," he said simply. "Together. Because apart, we're both dead." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of revelations and danger. Dante moved Vivian to a safe house on the outskirts of the city, a sleek, modern apartment with bulletproof windows and security that made Fort Knox look casual. He assigned 2 guards to watch her around the clock, men with cold eyes and shoulder holsters who spoke in terse sentences. "You're a prisoner," Vivian said bitterly the first night, staring out at the city lights from behind glass she couldn't open. "You're alive," Dante corrected, standing in the doorway with exhaustion carved into his features. "The Mocchetti family has operatives everywhere. If word gets out that Antonio's stolen daughter has resurfaced." "Stop calling me that." She spun to face him, her eyes red from crying. "I don't know who I am anymore. I'm not Vivian Walters, she never existed. I'm not Vivian Mocchetti, I don't remember that life. I'm just nothing." Dante crossed the room before he could stop himself, his hands gripping her shoulders. "You're you. The woman who called me out in a ballroom full of cowards. The woman who rebuilt herself from tragedy. Your name doesn't change that. Everything changes that." She shoved him away, her voice breaking. "My parents, the people I loved, who raised me, they weren't even really my parents. They were hiding me. And they died because of it. Because of your family." The accusation landed like a knife between his ribs. Dante stepped back, his face hardening into the mask he wore for the world. "I know. And I can't change that. But I can keep you breathing long enough to figure out who wants you dead now. Maybe I don't want to be kept alive by you." The words were cruel, designed to hurt. "Maybe I'd rather take my chances alone than owe my life to a Corleone." Something flickered in Dante's eyes, pain, quickly buried. "Fine. Leave. I'll have Gabriel arrange transportation out of the country. New identity, new life. You'll never have to see me again." He turned to walk out, and Vivian felt panic claw at her throat. She hated him. She should hate him. But the thought of him leaving, of facing this nightmare alone. "Wait." Her voice was small. Dante stopped but didn't turn around, his shoulders rigid with tension. "I don't," Vivian struggled for words. "I don't actually want you to go." He turned slowly, and the vulnerability in his expression nearly broke her. "Why?" "Because I'm terrified," she admitted, her walls crumbling. "And you're the only person who knows the truth. The only person who," she couldn't finish. "Who what?" He took a step closer, his voice soft. "Who looks at me like I'm still real," she whispered. "Even when I feel like I'm disappearing." Dante closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. No hesitation, no asking permission. Just solid warmth and the unexpected gentleness of a man the world called a monster. Vivian should have pushed him away. Should have remembered that his family destroyed hers, that his blood was poison, that this was wrong on every level. Instead, she buried her face in his chest and sobbed, for her parents, for her stolen identity, for the impossible situation that was making her fall for the one man she should destroy. "I've got you," Dante murmured against her hair. "I won't let anyone hurt you. Not the Mocchettis. Not anyone." "Even you?" she asked, her voice muffled against his shout. His arms tightened around her. "Especially me." They stood like that for long minutes, the boundaries between enemy and protector, between hatred and something far more complicated, dissolving in the quiet of the safe house. Then Dante's phone buzzed. He pulled back to check it, and his face went stone cold. "Gabriel. There's been a development." Within the hour, Gabriel arrived with news that made Vivian's blood run to ice. Lorenzo Mocchetti knows she's alive, Gabriel said without preamble, his expression grim. Someone leaked it, I don't know who yet. But he's already sent a team to the city. They'll be here by morning. Lorenzo? Vivian asked, the name foreign on her tongue. Your uncle, Dante said quietly. Head of the Mocchetti family since your grandfather died. He's been looking for you for 26 years. Looking for me, to kill me. Gabriel and Dante exchanged glances. We don't know, Gabriel admitted. The Mocchettis have a complicated relationship with blood. Your family, that might protect you. Or it might make you a target for what my father did. There's more, Gabriel continued, his voice careful. Lorenzo's coming himself. He wants to meet you. And he's demanding that Dante hand you over as restitution for Antonio's crimes. Vivian felt the ground shift beneath her. Hand me over? Like property? Like a peace offering, Dante corrected, his voice hard as steel. If I give you to Lorenzo, it could end 50 years of war between our families. Hundreds of lives saved. Territory disputes resolved. It would be, he paused, his jaw working. It would be good business. The silence that followed was deafening. Vivian looked between them, understanding crystallizing with cold certainty. You're actually considering it? No, Dante said immediately. Yes, he is, Gabriel interjected. Boss, you know what's at stake. The family expects. I don't care what they expect. Dante's voice cracked like a whip. She's not a bargaining chip. She's exactly that, Gabriel pressed. And if you refuse to hand her over, Lorenzo will take it as an act of war. Everything you've built, every peace accord, every alliance, gone. We'll be back to bodies in the street and blood feuds that last generations. Then that's what happens. Dante turned to Vivian, and the fierce protectiveness in his eyes stole her breath. I'm not giving you to him. Maybe you should. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Vivian's mind was racing, calculating. If it ends the war, if it saves lives. No. Dante closed the distance between them, his hands framing her face with desperate intensity. Do you understand what he'll do to you? You're Antonio's stolen prize, raised by people we had killed. Lorenzo will either execute you publicly as revenge or lock you away as a symbol. Either way, you disappear. And if I stay with you? Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. People die. Your people, his people. More blood because I exist. Then more blood. Dante's forehead pressed against hers, his voice ragged. I've sacrificed everything for this family. My soul, my humanity, any chance at a normal life. I won't sacrifice you too. The confession hung between them, raw and undeniable. You barely know me, Vivian said, tears streaming down her face. I know enough. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I know you're the only person who's ever looked past the monster. I know that when you argue with me, I feel alive for the first time in years. I know that if I let Lorenzo take you, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if you're suffering because I was too weak to protect you. Protecting me makes you weak, she pointed out, even as her heart shattered and reformed around his words. Then I'll be weak. Dante pulled back, his expression hardening into something dangerous. Gabriel, triple the guards. Lock down every Corleone property in the city. If Lorenzo wants her, he'll have to go through every soldier we have. Boss, this is suicide. Do it. The command was absolute. And find out who leaked her identity. I want their head on my desk by sunrise. Gabriel left, muttering under his breath about stubbornness and death wishes. Alone again, Vivian stared at Dante with a mixture of terror and something that felt disturbingly like hope. You're going to start a war for me. I'm going to end one, Dante corrected. Lorenzo thinks he can strong-arm me because that's how my father operated. But I'm not my father. And you're not a weapon to be traded. He paused, his voice dropping. You're the first thing I've wanted to protect instead of destroy in 15 years. Vivian's breath caught. Dante. I know this is insane, he continued, the words tumbling out like a confession. I know I'm the last person who should have feelings for you. But somewhere between hating you and hiring you and uncovering the truth, he stopped, seeming to struggle with the admission. You what? Vivian prompted, her heart hammering. I started falling for you, he said simply. And now I can't stop. The admission should have horrified her. Should have sent her running. But instead, Vivian felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been locked away since the moment she'd found those files. This is wrong, she whispered. On every level, this is. I know. Your family killed my parents. I know. We'll never be able to. He kissed her. It was desperate and gentle and tasted like tears and promises neither of them should make. Vivian's hands fisted in his shirt, torn between pushing him away and pulling him closer, between the hatred she should feel and the impossible, devastating truth that she was falling for him too. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. We'll figure this out, he murmured. Somehow. Together. But even as he said it, his phone buzzed with a message that made his blood run cold. Lorenzo Marchetti has arrived early. He's at your estate. And he's brought an army. The war had begun. And Vivian was the prize both sides would kill for. Lorenzo Marchetti was not what Vivian expected. She'd imagined a monster, scarred, brutal, the kind of man who wore violence like a second skin. Instead, the man who stood in Dante's estate library looked more like a distinguished professor. Silver hair swept back from a lined face, expensive suit perfectly tailored, eyes the same startling green as her own. Those eyes locked onto her the moment she entered the room, flanked by Dante and 4 armed guards. Dio mio, Lorenzo breathed, rising from his chair. You look exactly like your mother. Vivian's throat constricted. My mother is dead. Catherine Walters raised you with love, I'm sure. But Isabella Marchetti gave you life. Lorenzo took a step forward, and every guard in the room tensed. He noticed and stopped, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. I'm not here to hurt you, child. I'm here to bring you home. Home. Vivian's laugh was bitter. I don't have a home. Your family and his, she gestured at Dante, made sure of that. Pain flickered across Lorenzo's weathered face. Antonio Corleone stole you from your crib when you were 6 months old. Your mother, my sister, spent 15 years searching for you before grief killed her. Your father drank himself to death 2 years later. I've spent the last decade following every lead, every whisper, praying you were still alive. His voice cracked. And now you're standing here, looking at me like I'm the enemy. You brought an army to Dante's door, Vivian shot back. What am I supposed to think? I brought protection. Lorenzo's gaze shifted to Dante, hardening. Because I know the Corleones. I know what they do to things they can't control. And my niece, standing beside the son of her kidnapper, looking at him like, he stopped, his expression darkening. Madonna. He's gotten to you already. Nobody's gotten to me, Vivian snapped, even as her face flushed. I'm not a child. No. You're a Marchetti. Lorenzo's voice carried weight, legacy, expectations she didn't understand. You're the rightful heir to our family. Your father was my older brother, his death made you next in line. The families have been waiting for your return. The room spun. Heir? I don't want. What you want is irrelevant. The warmth had drained from Lorenzo's voice, replaced by the cold calculation of a man who'd ruled an empire for decades. You have a responsibility. Blood demands it. The only thing blood demands is that it stays inside my body, Vivian retorted. I'm not interested in your family business. Even if that business includes justice for the parents who raised you. Lorenzo pulled out a folder, terrifyingly similar to the one she'd found in Dante's office. Catherine and Thomas Walters were going to expose not just the Corleones, but a network of corrupt officials who'd been covering up child trafficking for years. They died protecting that story. Protecting you. He slid the folder across the table. Vivian's hands shook as she opened it, Dante reading over her shoulder. Inside were documents, photographs, recorded testimonies, evidence of a conspiracy that stretched far beyond mob wars. The people who helped Antonio kidnap you are still out there, Lorenzo continued. Still in power. Still destroying families. The Walters died trying to stop them. Don't you want to finish what they started? Vivian looked up at Dante, searching his face. Did you know about this? No. His voice was strained. My father kept secrets even from me. But if this is real. It's real, Lorenzo interrupted. And it goes deeper than either of our families. This isn't about mob territory anymore. It's about exposing the people who've been using our war as cover for their own crimes. Dante was silent for a long moment, his strategic mind clearly working through implications. Finally, he looked at Lorenzo. What are you proposing? An alliance. The words hung in the air like a bomb. You have resources, connections in city government. I have evidence and witnesses too terrified to come forward without protection. Together, we could actually take down the people responsible for. His gaze returned to Vivian. For all of it. You want me to work with a Corleone? Lorenzo's tone made it clear what he thought of that idea. I want justice for my sister. For your parents, he said to Vivian. And if that means putting aside 50 years of bloodshed, then yes. I'll work with the devil himself. Vivian felt Dante stiffen beside her. The insult was deliberate, a reminder of the chasm between their families. But something else was happening in that room, something neither man had anticipated. Vivian stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. If I do this, if I help you expose these people, I have conditions. Both men stared at her. First, no one touches Dante. Whatever happens, whoever goes down, he's not your target. She held Lorenzo's gaze. He didn't kidnap me. He didn't kill the Walters. He's trying to clean up his father's mess. Vivian, Dante started, but she cut him off. Second, I don't join your family, Lorenzo. I don't become heir to anything. I help you get justice, then I walk away from both of you and live my own life. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. That's not how family works. It's how I work. Vivian crossed her arms. Take it or leave it. But know that if you refuse, I'll disappear so deep neither of you will ever find me. And your evidence dies with my cooperation. It was a bluff, mostly. But she sold it with the same steel spine that had made her stand up to Dante in that ballroom. Lorenzo studied her for a long moment, then laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. You have your mother's fire. She would have liked you. He extended his hand. Deal. We take down the network, then you choose your own path. Vivian shook it, feeling the weight of generations shift around them. Dante hadn't moved, his expression unreadable. When Vivian turned to him, she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch, pride, fear, and something that looked dangerously like love. You didn't have to protect me, he said quietly, once Lorenzo had left to brief his men. I know. Vivian moved closer, drawn by a gravity she no longer wanted to fight. But you protected me first. When it would have been easier, smarter, to hand me over. That wasn't protection. Dante's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. That was selfishness. I couldn't let you go. Why? She needed to hear him say it again, needed the words to make sense of the chaos in her heart. Because somewhere between your insult and your intelligence and your absolutely reckless courage, you became mine. His voice was rough with emotion. And I don't give up what's mine. Ever. I'm not a possession, Dante. No. You're so much worse. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. You're a choice I keep making even when I know it'll destroy me. Vivian should have pushed him away. Should have reminded him that this was impossible, that their families had been at war for half a century, that her parents, both sets, had died because of the hatred between Mocchetti's and Corleones. Instead, she kissed him. This time it wasn't desperate or frantic. It was a promise, fragile and fierce and utterly terrifying. When they broke apart, both knew nothing would ever be the same. We're going to burn everything down, Vivian whispered against his lips. I know. Dante smiled, a real smile, dangerous and beautiful. Let's make sure we burn the right people. Over the next 72 hours, an impossible alliance formed. Lorenzo's evidence combined with Dante's connections painted a picture of corruption that reached into the governor's office, 3 federal judges, and a network of officials who'd been covering up child trafficking operations for decades. The Corleone-Mocchetti war had been deliberately stoked by these same officials, keeping both families too busy fighting each other to notice the real criminals operating in their shadows. Antonio Corleone hadn't just been a mobster. He'd been a pawn. And when he'd started asking questions about who was really running the trafficking network, they'd eliminated him, making it look like a heart attack. The truth was staggering in its scope. And as Vivian worked alongside Dante and Lorenzo, reviewing evidence and planning their attack, she realized something that both terrified and thrilled her. She was good at this. The strategic thinking, the careful planning, the ability to see patterns others missed. The skills that made her a brilliant consultant made her a dangerous player in this world. And for the first time since learning her true identity, Vivian felt like she was exactly where she belonged. "You're smiling," Dante observed one night, finding her alone in the war room they'd set up. "I'm about to help take down a child trafficking network and expose half the city's government," Vivian replied. "Why wouldn't I smile?" He moved behind her, arms wrapping around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. "Because 2 weeks ago, you were a consultant worried about quarterly reports. Now you're planning federal takedowns with 2 mob bosses." 3, she corrected. "Don't forget I'm technically a mob princess now." Dante's laugh rumbled through his chest into her back. "How could I forget?" They stood like that for a moment, wrapped in each other, before Vivian turned in his arms. "When this is over, we'll figure it out," Dante promised. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." It was a promise neither of them was sure they could keep. But as they prepared to strike at the heart of the conspiracy that had destroyed both their lives, Vivian realized something profound. She wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. She was fighting for a future where she and Dante could exist without the weight of their family's sins crushing them. And she would burn down anyone who stood in their way. The takedown happened on a cold Thursday morning, coordinated across 12 locations simultaneously. Federal agents, the few Lorenzo and Dante had vetted as clean, moved in sync with Mocchetti and Corleone soldiers. It was unprecedented, impossible, and absolutely necessary. The conspiracy had roots everywhere, and pulling it out required surgical precision and overwhelming force. Vivian watched from a secure command center as the operations unfolded on multiple screens. Dante stood beside her, phone pressed to his ear, orchestrating his people. Lorenzo worked the other side of the room, his decades of experience evident in every calm, calculated order. "Target 1 secured," a voice crackled through the radio. "Governor Mitchell, arrested in his home with evidence of 20 years of payoffs." "Target 3 down," another report. "Judge Patricia Holloway, caught with files she'd been ordered to destroy." One by one, the dominoes fell. But Vivian's attention was fixed on screen 7, the location that mattered most. Richard Sawyer, chief of police. The man who'd signed off on her parents' death certificates, who'd buried the investigation, who'd been the linchpin holding the entire conspiracy together for 30 years. Team 7, status. Dante demanded into his phone. Static. Then gunfire through the speaker. Vivian's blood ran cold. "What's happening?" "Sawyer knew we were coming." Gabriel's voice came through strained. "He's got private security, military grade. We pinned down." Dante's jaw tightened. "Fall back. We'll regroup, Anne." "No." Vivian grabbed his arm. "If he escapes, the whole case collapses. He's the only one who can testify about the others. We need him alive." "We need you alive more," Dante countered. "I'm going." Lorenzo appeared beside them, already strapping on body armor. "My men can flank from the east while Sawyer's focused on Gabriel." "You'll never make it in time," Dante said. "His compound has 3 layers of security." "Then we need someone he won't expect." Vivian reached for a spare vest from the equipment rack. "Someone he thinks is just a victim. Someone he'll underestimate." "Absolutely not." Dante physically stepped between her and the gear. "You're not going into a fight. I'm the only one who can get close enough." Vivian met his eyes, pleading for him to understand. "Sawyer processed my parents' case. He'll want to see me, the loose end he thought was tied up. It'll make him cocky, careless." "She's right," Lorenzo admitted grudgingly. "But she'll need backup. Close backup." "I'll go with her." Dante was already pulling on his own vest, checking his weapon with practiced efficiency. "We go in through the service in trance. While I create a distraction at the front," Lorenzo finished. He looked at Vivian with an expression that was pure family, protective and proud. Your mother would have done the same thing. Fearless to a fault. 20 minutes later, Vivian crouched beside Dante in the shadows outside Sawyer's compound. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands were steady. Everything had led to this moment, every loss, every revelation, every impossible choice. Stay behind me, Dante whispered. And if anything goes wrong. Nothing will go wrong. She squeezed his hand once, quickly. Trust me. His eyes said he did, even as everything in him screamed to lock her somewhere safe. Lorenzo's distraction came loud and explosive, flashbangs at the front gate, shouted demands for surrender. Sawyer's security rushed toward the noise, exactly as planned. Dante and Vivian slipped through the service entrance like ghosts. The house was massive, opulent, built on decades of blood money. They moved through hallways lined with expensive art, past rooms that reeked of power and corruption. Dante navigated with silent hand signals, years of experience evident in every controlled movement. They found Sawyer in his study, frantically feeding documents into an industrial shredder. Step away from the shredder, Chief. Dante's voice was cold as winter, his weapon trained center mass. Sawyer spun, his florid face going pale, then red with fury when he saw them. Corleone. I should have known you'd be involved in this circus. His eyes slid to Vivian and widened. And you brought the girl. How sentimental. You killed my parents, Vivian said, stepping forward despite Dante's warning hand. Thomas and Catherine Walters. You signed their death certificates. You buried the investigation. I did my job. Sawyer's hand inched toward his desk drawer. They were going to destroy important people. People who keep this city running. They were going to save children. Vivian's voice shook with rage. Children being trafficked, sold, destroyed while you and your important people looked the other way and collected paychecks. Naive little girl. Sawyer's hand reached the drawer. You think you're the hero in this story? You're nothing but. Dante fired. The bullet struck the desk inches from Sawyer's hand, a warning shot that made the older man freeze. Next one goes through your wrist, Dante said calmly. Then your knee. Then somewhere that'll make you wish I'd aimed for your head. Now step away from the desk. Sawyer's face twisted with hatred, but he raised his hands. Gabriel and 2 agents burst through the door moments later, weapons drawn. Buildings secure. Sawyer, you're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, racketeering. I want immunity. Sawyer's voice was desperate now. I'll testify. I'll give you names, dates, everything. But I want full immunity and witness protection. Dante looked at Vivian, letting her make the call. Every fiber of her being screamed for justice, for this man to pay for what he'd done. But she thought of the other victims, the children still missing, the network that extended far beyond one corrupt cop. Give us everyone, she said finally. Every name, every detail, every piece of evidence. And then you get to live in a cage for the rest of your life, knowing you betrayed everyone you ever worked with. Sawyer's face crumpled. He'd expected mercy. This was something colder, survival purchased with complete betrayal. Deal, he whispered. The next 6 hours were a blur of arrests, confessions, and evidence so damning that 3 senators resigned before they could be indicted. Sawyer sang like a canary, implicating everyone from city councilmen to federal officials. The conspiracy unraveled like cheap thread, and with it came dozens of rescue operations, children found, families reunited, monsters dragged into the light. By the time the sun set, the city's entire power structure had been gutted. And standing in the middle of the chaos, exhausted and covered in dust, Vivian felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace. You did it, Dante said quietly, appearing beside her as the last arrest van pulled away. Your parents would be proud. Our parents, Vivian corrected, leaning into him. The Walters raised me, but the Mocchettis gave me the strength to finish this. And you, she looked up at him, this impossible man who'd gone from enemy to everything. You gave me the courage to try. Dante pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like armor. So what now? It was the question they'd been avoiding. The conspiracy was exposed, the guilty were in custody. But the Mocchetti family still expected Vivian to take her place. And the Corleone organization still had enemies who'd see Dante's alliance with Lorenzo as weakness. Now, Lorenzo's voice interrupted, we discuss the future. He approached with several Mocchetti lieutenants, their expressions unreadable. Dante tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. But Lorenzo simply extended his hand, to Dante. You protected my niece when you could have used her as a bargaining chip. You helped expose the people who've been bleeding our families dry for decades. And you did it knowing it might cost you everything. Lorenzo's grip was firm, respectful. The war between Mocchetti and Corleone ends tonight. You have my word. Dante shook his hand, years of hatred dissolving in a single gesture. And Vivian is free to choose her own path. Lorenzo looked at his niece with obvious affection. Though I hope that path includes occasional Sunday dinners with her uncle. Vivian laughed, the sound bright and genuine. I think I can manage that. As Lorenzo and his people departed, as the federal agents finished their documentation, as the city began processing the earthquake that had just reshaped its entire government, Dante and Vivian stood together watching the sunrise. I'm still angry, Vivian admitted quietly. About my parents, about the lies, about all of it. That doesn't just disappear. I know. Dante's thumb traced circles on her hand. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what my family did to yours. Don't. She turned to face him fully. Don't spend your life apologizing for Antonio's sins. Spend it building something better. Something clean. Something worth protecting, he suggested, his gray eyes soft in the dawn light. Worth loving, she corrected. The kiss was different this time, not desperate or forbidden, but full of possibility. Full of a future they'd carved out of blood and betrayal and impossible choices. When they broke apart, both smiling despite everything, Dante asked, so what does the future look like for us? Vivian considered. Well, I'm unemployed, technically homeless, and apparently a mob princess. You're a reformed crime boss trying to go legitimate. We're both technically responsible for the biggest government scandal in city history. So business as usual. She laughed. Something like that. Think you can handle having me around full time? I think, Dante said slowly, pulling her close, that I'm going to spend every day proving I deserve to have you around at all. Good answer. Vivian kissed him again, tasting hope and new beginnings. Though you should know, I'm still going to argue with you constantly. I'm counting on it. His smile was genuine, transformative. Life would be boring otherwise. As they walked away from the compound, toward whatever came next, neither noticed the figure watching from across the street. A man with a camera, snapping photos, sending them to someone who'd paid very well for information on Vivian Mocchetti's whereabouts. The conspiracy had been exposed. The guilty were arrested. But in the shadows, someone else was watching. Someone who knew that Vivian's real family legacy was far more valuable than either Lorenzo or Dante suspected. Someone who'd been waiting 26 years for the Mocchetti heir to resurface. And who had very different plans for her future. The threat revealed itself within hours of their victory. Vivian and Dante had barely returned to his estate when Gabriel burst into the room, his face ashen. Boss, we have a problem. Someone's been watching the compound. Professional surveillance, military-grade equipment. Sawyer's people. Dante was already reaching for his weapon. No. Gabriel pulled up photos on his tablet, grainy images of Vivian and Dante leaving the police station, entering cars, standing together at sunrise. These were sent to an encrypted server we've been trying to trace for months. It's connected to something bigger. Lorenzo arrived minutes later, his expression grim. I know who's behind this. And Vivian, you need to hear the truth about your family. They gathered in Dante's secure office. Vivian, Dante, Lorenzo, and Gabriel. What Lorenzo revealed made Vivian's blood run cold. The Mocchetti family isn't just about organized crime, Lorenzo began. For generations, we've been guardians of something far more valuable, information. Documents that prove corruption at the highest levels of governments worldwide. Evidence that could topple dynasties, destroy empires. Like insurance, Dante murmured, understanding dawning. Exactly. Lorenzo looked at Vivian. Your grandfather kept these documents hidden, and when he died, the location died with him. Except he left clues, clues encoded in something only his direct heir could access. Your father would have been that heir, but when he died, it passed to you. I don't know anything about secret documents, Vivian protested. Not consciously. But your grandfather was brilliant. He embedded the key in your DNA, literally. A genetic marker that activates a biometric lock. Lorenzo pulled out an old photograph of a young girl with green eyes and dark curls. This is you at 6 months old, the day before Antonio took you. Your grandfather had just completed the encoding. The room spun. You're telling me I'm a living key. And now that you've resurfaced, everyone who wants those documents knows exactly where to find you. Gabriel's tablet buzzed with new intel. Boss, we've got movement. 3 separate teams converging on our location, none of them ours or Mocchetti's. Dante was already moving, issuing rapid orders. Lock down the estate. All personnel to defensive positions. Gabriel, get a route to the safe house. There's no running from this, Lorenzo interrupted. These people will hunt her forever. The only way to end it is to give them what they want. Absolutely not, Dante snarled. Not give them, Lorenzo clarified. But we can use what they want as bait. Draw them out, eliminate the threat permanently. Vivian's mind raced, pieces clicking into place. The documents, if they're that dangerous, why not just destroy them? Because they're also protection, Lorenzo explained. Insurance against the people who've been running things from the shadows. Without those documents, families like ours become targets. With them, we have leverage. So we're trapped between being hunted for the documents or being vulnerable without them. Vivian looked between the 2 men who'd somehow become her family. Unless we find them first and decide what to do with them ourselves. Dante's eyes lit with understanding. Where's the lock? Family estate in Sicily, Lorenzo said. But getting there with 3 enemy teams on our tail. We don't go to Sicily. Vivian's voice was steady, clear. We make them think we are, draw them out, and eliminate them here. Then we go retrieve the documents on our terms. Both men stared at her. That's, Dante started. Brilliant, Lorenzo finished, a smile creeping across his face. You really are Mocchetti. The plan came together quickly. Gabriel leaked false intel about their flight to Sicily, complete with fake flight plans and hotel reservations. Meanwhile, Dante and Lorenzo prepared the estate for the coming assault. This is insane, Vivian muttered, checking the weapon Dante had insisted she carry. I was a consultant 2 months ago. Now I'm bait in a mob war. You're not bait. Dante appeared behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. You're the queen on the chessboard, the most powerful piece. We're just the knights clearing your path. She turned in his arms. If something happens to you. It won't. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. We're ending this tonight, Vivian. All of it. And then we're going to build a life where nobody's hunting us, nobody's watching us, nobody's trying to use us as pawns. Promise. Promise. The attack came at midnight. 3 teams, just as Gabriel predicted, mercenaries hired by various groups who wanted those documents. They came expecting an easy target, a frightened woman and her protectors. They found a fortress. Corleone and Mocchetti soldiers fought side by side for the first time in 50 years, their combined expertise overwhelming the attackers. Dante moved through the chaos like a predator, every movement economical and lethal. Lorenzo commanded from the security center, orchestrating defenses with decades of experience. And Vivian surprised everyone, including herself. When one mercenary breached their inner defenses and came at her with a knife, she didn't freeze. Years of self-defense classes combined with raw survival instinct kicked in. She dodged, twisted, and used his momentum against him. By the time Dante reached her, the mercenary was unconscious at her feet. Remind me never to underestimate you, Dante said with genuine admiration. Too late for that, Vivian replied, breathing hard but smiling. The battle was over in 40 minutes. All 3 teams neutralized, their handlers traced and arrested by federal agents who'd been coordinating with Gabriel. As dawn broke over the estate, Vivian stood in the center of the aftermath, exhausted, bruised, but alive. It's over, she whispered. Not quite. Lorenzo approached with a leather-bound journal. This was on your grandfather. His personal diary. It has the location of the biometric lock, and a message for his heir. With shaking hands, Vivian opened the journal to the marked page. Her grandfather's handwriting was elegant, precise. To my heir, if you're reading this, you've survived trials I pray you never had to face. The documents I've protected are both weapon and shield. Use them wisely. But know this, the true treasure isn't information or power. It's the strength to choose your own path despite the weight of legacy. You owe nothing to this family except what you freely give. Be free, child. Be happy. That's the only inheritance that matters. Tears streamed down Vivian's face as she read the words again and again. So? Dante asked softly. What do you want to do? Vivian looked at him, at Lorenzo, at the life she'd stumbled into, violent and complicated and impossible. But also full of people who'd risked everything for her. Full of possibilities she'd never imagined. We go to Sicily, she decided. We retrieve the documents. And then we use them to clean house, not just in our families, but everywhere they can make a difference. My parents, the Walters, died trying to expose corruption. The Mocchettis protected evidence that could do exactly that. Maybe it's time to finish what everyone started. Lorenzo nodded slowly. That's a dangerous path. It makes you a target again. I'm already a target, Vivian pointed out. At least this way, I'm a target doing something meaningful. And you? Lorenzo looked at Dante. The Corleone family won't appreciate their leader championing transparency. Dante pulled Vivian close, his choice clear in the gesture. Then they can find a new leader. I'm done sacrificing what matters for an empire built on fear. The trip to Sicily was everything Vivian had never known she needed. Beautiful and haunting and full of connection to roots she'd thought severed forever. The family estate was a sprawling villa overlooking the Mediterranean, and the biometric lock her grandfather had created was hidden in the wine cellar behind a painting of her grandmother. Her genetic marker activated it perfectly, and inside were documents that would take months to fully process, evidence of corruption spanning decades and continents. This could change everything, Gabriel breathed, photographing pages with systematic precision. It will change everything, Vivian corrected. Starting now. They didn't keep it all. Some secrets, they determined, caused more harm exposed than protected. But the documents proving child trafficking networks, government corruption, and corporate malfeasance? Those went to journalists, federal prosecutors, international courts. The revelations sent shockwaves across the globe. And standing at the center of it all, Vivian finally understood what her grandfather meant. She'd chosen her path, not because of blood or legacy or obligation, but because it was right. Back in the city, as the dust settled and the legal proceedings began, Vivian and Dante carved out something neither had thought possible: peace. The Corleone empire shifted from criminal enterprise to legitimate business under Dante's ruthless reformation. Some soldiers left, unwilling to adapt. Others stayed, grateful for the chance at something clean. Lorenzo officially acknowledged Vivian as family but respected her choice to remain independent. She consulted for both organizations, Mocchetti and Corleone, using her brilliant strategic mind to guide them toward legitimacy. And in the quiet moments between meetings and consultations and the ongoing work of dismantling corruption, Vivian and Dante built something fragile and fierce. Love. Not the desperate, forbidden kind born of danger. But the steady, chosen kind built on trust and truth and shared purpose. Do you ever regret it? Dante asked one evening, holding her on the balcony of their new apartment, neutral territory, belonging to neither family. Walking into that party, insulting a mob boss, getting dragged into this whole mess. Vivian considered the question seriously. She thought about her parents, both sets, and the circuitous path that had led her here. Thought about the children they'd saved, the corruption they'd exposed, the impossible alliance that had changed everything. I regret the champagne stain, she said finally. That was a really expensive dress. Dante laughed, the sound free and genuine. I'll buy you 100 dresses. I don't want 100 dresses. She turned in his arms, her hands framing his face. I want this. You, me, building something that matters. Something that doesn't require lies or violence or blood feuds. I can't promise it'll always be easy, Dante warned. Nothing worth having is easy. Vivian kissed him softly. But I'm not afraid of difficult. I told a Mafia boss he lacked home training and survived. I think I can handle whatever comes next. You did more than survive. Dante held her gaze, his voice thick with emotion. You transformed everything. Me, my family, this entire city. Yours, she finished. If you'll have me. Every day, he promised. For the rest of our lives. They stood together as the sun set over the city, a city slowly healing from decades of corruption, a city learning to hope again. And in that moment, Vivian felt something she'd been searching for since the night her world shattered. Home. Not a place or a family name or a legacy written in blood. But the choice to stand beside someone who'd seen her at her worst and her best, and loved her through all of it. The girl who'd lost everything had found something infinitely better. Herself. And in finding herself, she'd found love, purpose, and the courage to rewrite a future that had once seemed written in stone. The war between Moschetti and Corleone was over. The corruption that had destroyed families was being systematically dismantled. And in its place, something new was growing, fragile but determined, like flowers pushing through concrete. Hope. Vivian kissed Dante again, tasting that hope, that future, that impossible happy ending neither had dared imagine. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I know, he replied, smiling. You told me I lacked home training. It was love at first insult. She laughed, bright and free and full of joy, and Dante knew he'd spend the rest of his life making her laugh exactly like that. They'd started as enemies, become reluctant allies, and transformed into something neither had words for. Partners, lovers, survivors of a war neither had chosen but both had ended. And as stars began appearing in the darkening sky, as the city lights flickered on below them, Vivian and Dante held each other and faced their future together. We have come to the end of the story. Thank you for watching to the end. Share your opinion about this story in the comments below. I like getting feedback from my audience. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our heartwarming stories.